Okay, see Camden, and are we waiting for Nathan?
Yeah, I don't see Nathan yet.
Okay, well, we can probably get started. Camden, is Nathan with you or you? Can you hear us?
No, he's not.
Okay.
I don't know where he is.
That's fine. Let's get started, I guess, in term to keep on time. But so the goal today was to kind of go over the sections for the commercialization pitch. And I know we didn't have a time to kind of discuss this in any detail, so this is the opportunity for that. So first of all, there's a final presentation in class on the 9th, and then there's a video pitch. The pitch is basically kind of, you can make it anything you want, but keep it short. So we can talk about it later. But I want to spend some time on these sections for the final presentation for your particular project. So first of all, let me ask if you have done anything or you haven't started on this. Have you looked at the instructions?
I remember seeing them, but I haven't looked through them in detail.
Okay, so this is the time to do it then. So first of all, okay, this Nathan's coming. First of all, is the brief elevator pitch. So this is basically, you need to kind of think through carefully and write. I would suggest write 1 or 2 or 3 sentences on exactly what it is that I mean, again, you have to put yourself in the shoes of a startup company, which is you, trying to commercialize your innovation for the hydrogen generation. So you need to summarize what your key innovation, key value proposition is in, let's say, 2-3 sentences. So I recommend writing it down and kind of practicing it. So keep it as clean, 30 seconds to 60 seconds can be very long. So my suggestion is, one of you give a shot right now. How would you describe, give an elevator pitch for me? And the other, someone else should take notes. Go ahead, Brad, since you were, give me an elevator pitch.
Well, we live in a society today that requires a lot of energy, and the energy that we're using is not renewable and it's not green. The best green energy is hydrogen, but the storage isn't there. So if we create methane, we can store that and have a high energy density source that is green.
Okay, so a couple of comments. I think that's a great start. First of all, you identified the problem. A couple of comments here would be, you didn't explain specifically what the issue is. I guess you mentioned storage, so that's good. But I suppose you may want to say something specific about how you're solving the problem. I know that's hard to do, but that's something you may want to try to tie into that first 2, 3 sentences. Cool. And I know you have some interesting ideas there, so you have to kind of tie it in somehow in a simple way. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, cool, sounds good.
Nathan or Camden, do you guys have anything to add? Hopefully one of you, I'm going to record this so you can look back, but if you want to take notes, that's even better.
Yeah, I'm thinking the main advantages of our product specifically, or that is that it can actually be used because it doesn't have a huge fuel cell. It could potentially be something that could be used at home. And I honestly kind of was wondering if if you would object if we might kind of moved it away from the hydrogen application to being directly use of methane, because the more I look at our product, I'm like, this is the sort of thing that could maybe be paired into like a home, sort of paired with a home solar system. Because everybody now uses natural gas for something in their house, whether it's a stove or heater. maybe we could try to pitch something that's direct, created at the home, synthetic natural gas or like SMG. That could be pumped into a home gas system, pumped into your home gas lines. So I don't know if you have if you're opposed to, doing that actually.
Of course not. Yeah. I mean, you guys are in the driver's seat. I'm not opposed. Definitely not. To me, that sounds pretty a very interesting pivot, because now you can think about, I suppose, potentially retrofits and so on. Although connecting to an existing gas line is a little complicated, but that really opens up your market dramatically, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at we talked a little bit about this, and so the reason we avoid that, we were focusing on just actually doing everything in one process, was mostly to avoid having to buy a whole fuel cell for a demo. That kind of means that, okay, at the largest scales, it's probably less efficient, but at a sort of a smaller scale, you're saving a lot of initial investment, initial CapEx, by just having it be, these little nickel grids in this compact form, which makes sense more for consumer use than for industrial scale, if that makes sense. Smaller CapEx is going to work better for a smaller, for a customer than it is for a big industrial size.
Yeah, I mean, I think that raises some interesting also go-to-market strategies, which brings me to the second point, which is, you could, how does a person buy a house? You get a mortgage. You can easily add a solar installation to a mortgage. That is done today pretty commonly. So you could imagine adding something like your system to to a mortgage when a person buys a home or when a home is built. So there are lots of very interesting opportunities that come in where you can tie into existing infrastructure that already exists for residential solar. So that's actually quite interesting now that you mention it. Definitely, yeah. Digging in a little bit more on the go-to-market strategy, my suggestion here will be to try to answer the questions, who will be your customers, which again, these things should come out from the canvas, and there might be more segments, and each segment will have their own complexities and advantages and disadvantages. So that's something I'd like you to dig into in the next, for the last presentation. And if you have had some engagement or discussion with them, that really helps, like a voice of a customer. And if you haven't, it's fine. Part of the reason for the Canvas submission today was the second iteration of the Canvas was actually to finish the interview. So you could take advantage of that, but if not, it's fine. Let's say, do you have any questions on number 2 here?
So are we required to have interviews with individual potential customers, or is that's a necessary component? I was a little confused because it seems like what's required and then what's not.
Yeah, it's not necessary. You can make guesses, but for the Canvas, I did require you to do 3 interviews. It doesn't have to be a customer, but it can be a stakeholder or someone who can give you some feedback. For this, it's not necessary. If you have it, that's great. If you're not, it's okay. But if you're really aiming for a residential system, it's pretty easy to get some feedback from your friends or family or whatever, right? So
sure, yeah.
I would suggest having a brief discussion if you can. If not, it's fine. Again, really, it's for you to kind of think through this more carefully, and as getting more points of view to answer these questions always makes it a little bit more accurate, in my opinion. Okay, any other? So are you comfortable doing this? I just want to make sure. So my goal here is to make sure I'm available to you, because we didn't have a chance to spend too much time on these things. So you're okay with go-to-market strategy?
I feel okay with it.
Yeah, I feel okay.
Okay, great. Then let's move on to number 3, which is the market and industry analysis. This, I think, is fairly self-explanatory. So, and it should tie into your canvas clearly. So, so you would have identified some market in terms of your customer, which, for instance, Nathan just mentioned residential. But, you may want to, and you have to, not may, segment them out and understand how large that is. And you have to make guesses here to do some literature search. You have to answer this question, okay, how big is it? And make some realistic, I mean, there are 2 ways to do this analysis. One is you can do a top-down analysis, how big it is and kind of break it down. Or you can do a bottom-up where, okay, potentially every house could have this, or how many houses are there in the United States. Let's say that's your market, where there is enough sunlight, right? And then try to break it down, whether they're new construction, whether it's existing construction, and each of them have different complexities. So the level of complexity you want to go into for answering this question is up to you, but I would recommend, I don't want you to just do a cursory thing, go at least 1 level down. That makes sense. In other words, don't say, okay, it's every house in the world. So, every house in the developing world or something. That's a little bit too simplistic, right? Or not believable, I would say. Yeah. And once you have that kind of broken down, which you already have in your canvas, you also need to understand, okay, what is the dynamics of what's happening? Is this a market that is slowly shrinking? Is it growing? Is it growing slowly? Is it growing fast? And these things are important because it allows you to kind of project, okay, when you might make such a product 2, 3 years, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, what will happen? It's not just today. You need to understand what happens 5 years from now, right? It's a moving target, obviously. So you need to have some understanding of what that means. You don't want to be going after the maybe, for instance, the taxi cab industry today, considering what's happening. So I think those are, and then you probably want to say something about what is the incumbent technology, and if there is none, in many of your cases there is none, you may want to say what that is the situation. And channel partnership again comes out of your canvas. So any questions or concerns about this before we move on? No.
When you're talking about channel and partnership strategy, what do you mean by that?
So remember in the business canvas, you had a channels, which is basic, and their I believe activities. So channels refer to how the sale actually happens, whether someone goes to Costco and purchases it, and the other and whatever it is, website, whatever. And the other partnership refers to, okay, do you need key partners to actually make this happen, which could be mortgage lenders, or it could be contractors who do, in your case, residential building, whatever, that kind of stuff. So it should really it should tie back to your canvas unless you change things dramatically. So you shouldn't have to do a huge amount of extra work, it should come out of the canvas. Now this part I think is relatively straightforward. You guys already have this down. My suggestion here is summarize it. Keep it nice and short because it needs to come into 2-3 slides perhaps. And there are a few items here that you need to think about. What are the product development risks? What are your mitigation strategies for that? What value proposition? Again, these things can come out of the canvas as well. Think about IP if there are IP issues. If there are none, that's okay. So let's not. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we already discussed that. This is probably the hardest part, which is the simple financial plan. So here I posted a couple of articles on the class website down here. There are 2 articles. I recommend you read through them because it gives you some templates and very simple ideas on how to prepare it. So I don't have time to go through them carefully now, but if you have questions, I'm happy to get on another separate Zoom call to go over it. But my suggestion is get a template and just fill in your guesses. These are all guesses, right? But I want you to at least know how to make reasonable guesses and look at reasonable financials. And it can be very simple. It can be just a profit and loss statement or something like that. Okay. So this might be the hardest part here. So I will have you actually try it yourself first. But I expect to see some simple financial plan. It can be even just your Excel, or a Google Sheet. Now, the second part of this is about financing. You may want to think about, okay, whether it could be grants, whatever, we see, and that's what I mean. And if there are specific milestones that can help you win more funding and things like that. So just think in a very broad strokes on what that might look like. It's really a plan, really. So it could be, okay, you meet a certain metric performance of your prototype system. You deliver the first 10 systems or 1,000 systems, whatever. You can think about some realistic milestones. Again, it's really a way for you to think through how the execution of such a plan would look like. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions or concerns. Number 6, I think is relatively straightforward. You can, since your team was arbitrarily assigned to some extent, you don't need to spend too much time. You can even skip it if you want, right? Okay. Oh, okay. And that's it. I think now I think we're a little past to the next team, but since we start a minute or so later, do you have any questions before you guys we move on to the next team?
I'm good.
Okay, great.
I'm good.
Yeah, just let me know, and I'm happy to get on another Zoom call if needed. If it's helpful, we don't have to. All right, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and you're welcome to hang around, listen, but you don't have to. But use the time to work on this, okay? Don't just take off. I know everyone will get busy with finals, so that's why I'm trying to force some time here. Okay, great. So we have Kelsey, Amanda, and Stephen. I see Kelsey. Let's see.
We're all here together.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that makes it a lot easier. You're in class too. Okay. I am not. I am a little sick, so I'm decided not to come to class. So good. Let's see. So today, my goal is to just make sure that you are in a good state to do the final presentation here for the commercialization plan. And I want to just give you the opportunity to, if you have something to present, I can go through and give you feedback, or we can go through each of these sections and kind of talk about them and see where things fit in. First of all, let me ask if you had a chance to look at the instructions, and have you already thought about them or not yet?
We did look over them just like briefly before joining the Zoom. Mm-hmm. And we were just thinking that it would like kind of play off our first iteration of the canvas and then our second iteration also.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, perfect. That's my recommendation as well. So let's just dive in a little bit and look at these. So again, just to remind you, you have the final presentation next week, and then there's a video pitch following that. The video pitch, I would just say you can do whatever you want, but adapt it from your final presentation. Just keep it really short. Again, I want you to get the experience. That's my goal here. So the first section, so you have to address all of these sections. So the first one would be like a brief elevator pitch. So the idea here is that you want to be able to describe, here you're going to put yourselves in the shoes of a startup team that is taking an innovation and taking it into the real world. So here you have to be able to explain what you're doing, explain what problem you're solving in 30 to 60 seconds. So I have two recommendations. First, I would write it down in a couple of sentences, what you're actually trying to say, and iterate on that. This is very important. And the second thing is pitch it among your teammates and see comes out as, iterate on that, actually doing it live. Now, I'm going to ask you, maybe one of you, to do a pitch now to me based on your understanding. I know you haven't practiced, but I want to understand what the way you think. Go ahead.
Anybody want to go?
You can. You got it. Go for it.
30 to 60 seconds.
No, you don't have to think too much. Just explain what you're doing.
We are trying to come up with a cheap, affordable solution to provide areas that have experienced a disaster with some sort of clean, potable water.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's good. I like it's really short. So
yeah.
a couple of comments. So you identified, you identified a market segment, but you didn't necessarily explain the problem. I guess you're implicit what the problem is, but I would, if it were me, I would start with the problem statement. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Then the second part is, okay, so when you describe the problem statement, you also want to be very clear that this is a big problem, because it's, it doesn't have to be, but I would say most people want to be working on solving big problems. If you're if you're trying to get an investment or things like that. So I'm coming from that bias. It doesn't have to be, but that's one comment there. The second part of this really should be unique to you. So there are many ways to solve that problem because it's a big problem. So what is it that you are doing? And that's difficult to do, right? Because you have something complicated and it's technologically advanced, whatever. How do you distill that into 2 sentences? That is a difficult thing to do. So you really need to work at that, I would say. That was not conveyed to me at all, which is fine. It's really hard to do. Let's see. One other thing I would suggest is to, this may not be so critical, but again, conveying, why what you are doing is a great way to solve it. So, okay, so there is a problem definition to some extent. Then the solution, how you're going to address this problem. And then you may want to bolster why that particular solution is a great way to do it. Again, if I were to kind of break it down, this is the way I would think about it. Now, for the second section, go-to-market strategy should come really out of Canvas, especially now that you've thought about this for about several weeks. So literally, you should try to answer the questions. That's why I tried to make it a little bit didactic here. So who will be, have you had a chance? What is the response from your Canvas? Do you have multiple segments? What is the situation? I haven't seen the assignment yet.
I think on our Canvas, we have a couple different segments. So one of them would be disaster relief programs like FEMA or something like that, purchasing them in bulk in order to distribute them. And then another customer segment would be like one-off, like regular customers buying them to keep in their house for survival kits and stuff like that.
Okay, that's good. So you had identified the segments. Now, each one of them are quite different, right? So you have a scale difference, so that might affect the technical aspects of something I know you've thought about, but that will need to come into here somehow. So how to think about this? So first of all, describe your engagement discussion with them to date. So if you have had any discussion, that's great. If not, this is so mandatory, but I assume you have done some interviews for the Canvas, so you could include voice of the customer here. That's always helpful. And that answers the second and third questions. But if you don't have it, it's okay. You can make a guess at this point. But if you're really making a commercialization case for a real company, when you actually go out and work, I would strongly recommend you need this. Then, the last part, have you had any discussions, by the way?
I've talked kind of briefly with my
Okay.
partner, but that's about it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, getting some feedback even from your friends and family is always useful. My philosophy here is that the more brains look at a problem, you get different perspectives, and you will certainly learn a lot. So the last part is, again, how you acquire the customer certainly should come right out of the canvas. So I think that's relatively simple. So let's move on. Here, feel free to stop me if you have any questions. But on the market, so the market, you have identified 2 segments, so it should be relatively straightforward for you to do a market analysis. Now, what does that mean? That means, okay, you need to answer, okay, how big is the market? Now, that doesn't mean, how big is the market for clean water, which is every human on the planet, right? That would be a little bit simplistic. But since you've identified your 2 customers, then you have to identify, okay, how much does FEMA spend, or FEMA or equivalent to FEMA in other countries, let's say, how much do they spend on acquiring clean water somehow? And that can be found from, Google searches. You can ask the librarian. By the way, the Marriott librarians can help you and all that kind of stuff. So I expect you to do a little bit of research there. You don't need to spend huge amounts of time. I mean, I don't expect, but at least try to get a reasonable number. On the residential side, of course, it's a little bit easier. You can estimate it. You can do a bottom-up approach, which is basically, figure out, okay, how many outdoor enthusiasts are there in the United States, look at, there are various market reports. And then, of course, it doesn't have to be just the US. You can look at it worldwide. You may want to make more intelligent segment, detail after that. In other words, you have this big picture and then you segment them. Okay, they are, 20 to 30-year-old male, I don't know, 25 to 45-year-old female, single, married, whatever. I don't know if you want to kind of go down there. You can go into huge amounts of complexity or less. But those are things you can think about as well. And these are important, of course, because that affects how you do your acquisition of the customers, as you know from the canvas, right? Mm-hmm. So really, what I'm really looking for is for you to think through these things and connect it back to your canvas, but also, more importantly, to your technology. So in other words, okay, if you're selling it to FEMA, they may not care about the weight or because they need a huge scale. But if you're selling it to some outdoor enthusiasts, of course, it has to be portable. So how are you going to make it portable? It's a completely different decision. Your sales cycle is very different, right? People might go to Home Depot or REI or whatever to purchase it. So really think through them a little bit. And what I'm looking for is for you to feed back to your technical design decisions. Now, I'm not asking you to redo the design, but at least recognize where those decisions affect what we are talking about here. So no need to go back and redo anything. I'm not asking you to do more work, but I want you to identify these relationships. Okay, how is the market growing? How fast? I think those you should find out, because really, as I was saying before, bringing something like this to market typically will take 2 years, 4 years, whatever. So you need to understand what happens in the 4 to 5 year time frame to the market that you're looking at. You want it to increase, not decrease, right? So you want to kind of think about that as well. The speed of growth, things like that. But most of the Google searches will give you this kind of information. Think about competitors who are the incumbents. I mean, I think you already have this, but kind of clarify that better. Channel partnership strategies, these come out of the canvas directly, right? So channel, as you know, how you're going to get your product to the customer. So think, obviously, your 2 segments are very different. And I think you already have this from the canvas, so it should be easy for you to take it out. The partnership really comes out of the relationships and activities part of the canvas as well. So you can extract from that. Again, you don't need to redo anything. Just extract information and place it in a way that makes sense. That's what I'm expecting from you. What's the time? I'm too slow here. Okay. So on the technical product, I'm not going to spend much time on it because this you should be the experts on by now. My recommendation is take your last presentation and summarize it into 1 or 2 slides. So it has to be really clean, really short and explanatory. 2 things I will highlight is think about what are the product development risks, the key things that might be problematic, how you mitigate them, and think about IP if there is any.
Yeah.
And is there a question or no? Okay. This part is probably the hardest part, and for all of us, even for me as well, this is essentially the economics and the financial plan. So I don't have time to go over this today, but I posted 2 articles. If you go to the website, there are 2 articles, 1 and 2. I strongly recommend reading them. It's down here. They give you some templates for the financials. So I expect to see some simple financial model, revenue, costs, profit and loss, whatever, but something to tell me that you actually thought about this and made something in Excel or Google Sheet or whatever.
Okay.
I'm going to leave the complexity up to you. And if you want me to go through it with you, I can do it, but we can schedule a separate Zoom call, but you don't have to, but I'll make myself available. The second point here is the milestone-based funding. So you may want to think about, okay, how are you going to fund this and other particular milestones, whether you make progress on a prototype or whether you deliver certain numbers. This part you can probably skip, or pretty easy for you. So I'm going to skip it for now. And that's basically it.
Good deal.
So great. I would say use the rest of the time in the class to kind of go over what we discussed and start making progress on this. And just message me if you have any questions or if you want me to look at something. Happy to do it this week.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. See you. Let's see. You are welcome to stick around, but you don't have to. So I see Chauncey, Alex, and Amartya. You guys are on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Great.
Chauncey's here.